Well, the webcast should be a sufficient recording. The other one is just a backup, so that's us ready to start, Chair.
Okay, that's super, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to today's meeting of the Audit and Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Andrew Morrison, the chair of this committee, and I'm sorry I cannot join you in person today due to seasonal flu. So we'll press on as a hybrid meeting, and I'd like to begin with some preliminary issues, just items of housekeeping as it is a hybrid meeting. So, as a reminder, this meeting will be recorded and a copy of the recording will be made available on the Council's YouTube channel following the end of the meeting. To help with the smooth running of the meeting, if you are joining remotely, we have a number with us today who are online. I'd be grateful if you would mute your microphone when you're not speaking, use the raise your hand button when you'd like to raise an issue, and lower it again when you're finished speaking, and not use the chat function for debate amongst one another. And as I am online today also, if I don't follow these things, please feel free to point it out. For those in the chamber today, please remember to activate your microphone when speaking and switch it off again when you're finished. That's both for the recording and for the benefit of those of us online so we can hear what's been said. Myself and audit officers attending will monitor proceedings with a view to ensuring all requests to speak are seen, and would appreciate obviously some additional support from officers who are in the chamber to see that any requests to speak from those in the chamber are picked up. So, the officers attending the meeting today, we have quite a list. We have Margaret McCrossan, as usual, Head of Accountancy and Chief Financial Officer, Barbara Clark, Chief Accountant, Mark Ratter, Director of Education, Janice Collins, Head of Education Services, Performance and Quality Improvement, Gillian McCartney, Head of Place, Michelle McGuckin, Principal Officer of Capital Projects, Michelle Blair, Council's Chief Auditor, Linda Hutchison, Clerk to the Committee, Leslie Ann Burns, Assistant Committee Services Officer, and finally Grace Scanlon, who's from our External Auditors, Ernst & Young. That takes us on to the formal agenda for today's business. Item number 1, apologies for absence. I have Councillor Annette Ireland. Clerk, do we have any others?
No, that's all the apologies, Chair.
Okay, that's super, thank you. Item number 2 is declarations of interest. As a reminder, the Council's Code of Conduct requires elected members to declare any financial or non-financial interests they may have on items in today's agenda. Are there any such declarations to be made? And presumably there are no declarations from within the chamber. Okay.
I can
Item
confirm
number
that.
3. Okay, thank you for confirming. Thanks, Linda. Item number 3, Chairman's Report. Just to update you, yesterday I attended a cyber resilience and risk training presentation, which was for public sector board members, which I found very helpful. That was provided by the Scottish Government's Cyber Resilience Unit. And of course, so much of our operations now is dependent on cyber and IT infrastructure. So I felt it was a really important session for the Chair of Audit and Scrutiny to attend. The half-day workshop underlined the importance of creating an effective cybersecurity culture, covering common cyber threats and risks, the need to safeguard organisations, including their own, assessing cyber risk exposure, the identification of critical data and systems, and how to respond to incidents. So that's the main thrust of my Chairman's report today. Are there any questions? Okay, there are no questions. Okay, that concludes my report and brings us on to item 4. And I'd like to call in Linda Hutchison, Clerk of the Committee, to speak to this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report summarises the clarification received and already circulated on queries that were raised at the last meeting regarding the 22-23 annual account, specifically on the future expenditure of unspent COVID grants and why council income as shown in the comprehensive income and expenditure statement had substantially reduced in relation to the Health and Social Care Partnership. It's recommended that the committee note the position.
Thank you, Clerk. I was quite content to see that all the grant the grant income has been committed as required. So there's nothing that we potentially lose due to it running out of time. Are there any questions from members of the committee on this? I'll be happy to accept.
I can confirm that there's no questions from the floor.
Agreed.
That's super. Thank you. Item number 5 in that case is the Interim Treasury Management Report for Q2 of the 23-24 financial year, and I'd like to call on Barbara Clark, Chief Accountant, to speak to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Oh, hold on a second. Apologies, my voice is gone.
That makes 2 of us, don't worry.
It's just started, I don't know why. Apologies. As part of the Treasury Management Strategy, the Chief Financial Officer is required to report on a quarterly activities of its Treasury Management operations, and this report is to achieve that requirement. This is a very high-level report showing the Council's debt position, along with graphs depicting the movement in the investment and borrowing over the first 6 months of the financial year. From the report, you can see that the long-term borrowing is static, with no long-term borrowing having been taken due to the high levels of interest currently offered. This has resulted in an increase in internal borrowing. As part of the Council's strategy, the percentage of variable rate loans should be no more than 15% of the total debt outstanding, and the first 6 months of the year this peaked at just over 7%. This will creep up as PWLB loans are paid off or reduce as further PWLB loans are taken. With regards to the short-term investments, these have increased due to the cash flows in both capital and revenue. Both expenditure and income can fluctuate daily, depending on whether there's just been a pay run or a large creditor run, so the short-term balances reflect these cash flow movements. The prudential indicators in the report help to confirm that the capital investment plans and Treasury management decisions are affordable, prudent and sustainable. In particular, the prudential indicators 3 and 4 demonstrate that the Council is operating well within its limits. This is because of the profiling of the capital spend since the indicators were first approved in March. Lastly, the report requests that the Committee recommend to the Council that the attached list of counterparties be approved. This has not changed from the counterparty list last approved as part of the Q1 report. All investments are restricted to UK bodies with a high credit rating, with a maximum period of investment restricted to 6 months. I'm happy to take any questions on the report, Chair. Thanks.
That's super, Barbara. Thank you. And are there any questions from members online or in the chamber?
We've got a question from Councillor Wallace.
Sure. Councillor Wallace, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just noticing this, just to get this right, in terms of monies that we are investing, we have an upper limit, the Council has an upper limit of 15% for the variable rate. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, in times when we're actually, it's not interest rates going down just now, interest rates are actually on the rise, as to whether, is there any advice to suggest that we should be increasing that upper limit to take advantage of these variable rates?
We would only take long-term borrowing fixed rates, like the PWLB. It would be the short-term borrowing that we could take that could potentially be variable.
Okay, thanks. No, I was just misunderstanding that. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. There was one item which was raised at the last full council by Councillor Andrew Anderson with regards to the ethical considerations of the counterparties we make deposits to. Is there any comment on that at all? I'll be quite happy that ethical considerations are being taken into account.
If I could come in on that one. Our investments that we make are all in major financial institutions. So obviously we can't keep an eye on all of the myriad of investment decisions that they then make with their funding. It's not practical. I'm not sure whether the council question involved our own investments or those of Strathclyde Pension Fund, which are governed under a different set of circumstances. So, but as far as we are concerned, as I say, we don't do long-term investments. Our investments are no more than 6 months, and it's pretty generic into large banking institutions, so they're not targeted at any particular sector.
That's super. Thank you, Margaret. Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. I know I have received quite a lot of inquiries of due to recent times with what's going on in the Middle East, and particularly to do with investment and how they divest funds within the pension scheme, and if there are any investments being made within the State of Israel or Israeli companies. And I said that I would try my best to get answers to that and get back to the various constituents who have made inquiries. So if there was some sort of way that we would be able to further scrutinise those particular funds so that I could get back with an answer to my constituents, that would be helpful. Thanks.
I think anything that's to do with the pension scheme would be out with our remit as a committee. I believe Councillor Edlin wishes to come in at this point.
I think this question's out of order. If you actually look at the Treasury Management reports that I've seen, it mentions the institutions that the Council puts deposits into and manages, if you want to call it investments. I would prefer to call it money management, long-term money management. They're all blue chip British companies or American companies registered in Britain that have status, I think, the highest quality status as deposit institutions, and none of them are relevant to any war anywhere. They're just London-based institutions of the highest quality, and I think this kind of question from Councillor MacDonald is out of order.
Okay, well, we've had the question, we've had the response from Margaret.
Well, certainly it wasn't so much. Sorry,
Councillor MacDonald. It's already been determined that this is a matter for the Strathclyde Pension Fund, which is out with the remit of this committee's considerations. You are, of course, at liberty to take the matter up with the pension fund directly. Margaret, is there anything further that you wish to state to that, or are we quite happy?
No, nothing further to add.
Okay, thank you. That's great, thanks. On that basis, we're happy to accept the report.
Agreed.
Okay, super, thank you. Item number 6 is a National External Audit Report on the progress on the delivery of the 1140 hours of early learning and childcare. We have the report from the clerk, and the councillor leading on this is Councillor Wallace. Thank you.
Yes, so a copy of that National External Audit Report has already been circulated to all Audit and Scrutiny Committee members shortly after it was published in June 2023. As you've said, under the committee's specialisation arrangements, the member who's leading that is Councillor Wallace. The Director of Education has provided comments on the local position, and these are appended to the covering report, and both the Director of Education and Head of Education Services for Performance and Quality Improvement are attending the meeting today if you've got any issues you want to raise with them.
Super, thank you. Any questions or any further comment from Councillor Wallace on the review at all?
Yeah, we have comment. Councillor Wallace is wanting to raise some questions, Chair.
Yes, please, Councillor Wallace.
Okay, thank you. A couple of us here are already members of the Education Committee and reasonably au fait with what's going on with early learning. But I felt it was an opportunity for members of the Education Department to actually come along to Audit Committee, and if there's anything that they would like to actually bring to our attention that they think we could possibly assist with or highlight, then this, as I say, would be the opportunity to do so. When I was reading through the report here, I'm looking at sort of key phrases that were coming out, that the sector is fragile, problems with recruitment and retention. I'm also looking at how the Scottish Government are going to be in the process of reviewing the cost versus outcomes of 600 hours versus 1140 hours. And then I'm kind of looking later on at and whether this is maybe highlighting the kind of, if you like, the phrase I notice here, continued uncertainty around funding of early learning. I know East Renfrewshire, we were actually quite well ahead of the curve, and we went ahead with the capital expenditure, etc., and taking in the kids and taking on the 1140 contract, if you like, before we necessarily had to do so, which has obviously put pressure on our education department. And I'd really just be keen to get an overview from the members that are here from the education department as to really how they view sustainability of early learning in terms of funding, if you like, from central government, the problems that we do have with recruitment and retention, and really just an overview of how they see things presently and how they see the near future. Thank you.
I think there's some really good questions in there, Councillor Wallace, particularly around the sustainability and the recruitment challenges, which we see in other aspects of local government. I'd like to invite either Mark Ratter or Janice Collins to address those points, please, whoever between the two of them is best pleased to do so.
Thank you, Chair. We welcomed the national report, and in particular that continued focus on the expansion to 1140 hours. As mentioned, with any sort of transformational change, we need to monitor and evaluate the impact in terms of expenditure, also workforce and indeed quality. As Councillor Wallace mentioned, we provide an update on an annual basis to Education Committee, and it was Education Committee that took that decision to endorse the Director's request to proceed to deliver 1140 hours a year early, which allowed us to maybe overcome some of the teething problems before some of our neighbouring local authorities. So from August 2020, all children and families in East Renfrewshire were offered that place, and that's gone exceptionally well. We've had really positive feedback in terms of the early offer in supporting families' financial recovery from the pandemic, and also to work with children and young people who spent isolated periods of time during lockdown. Uptake is also another aspect that shows that the offer is being received really well. Almost all children that take that option to be in for 1140 hours, and we offer it that in a range of models. I think what strikes us as quite different from the national report is we made that commitment, and was Education Committee and the wider council supported to move Isabel Mere to be an additional support needs specific ELC setting, and also you will note that we've expanded some of our satellite provision to make sure that there's real equity in the offer for all children and young people in East Renfrewshire. We do continue to review and evaluate, and we have to, as in statute, consult with parents every 2 years, and that high level of satisfaction comes through. I do think in terms of the workforce, the model for implementation around growing our own certainly enabled us to recruit and be in that position for early delivery. However, there needs to be a continued investment into terms of professional learning for our staff who have joined the workforce, and to build their professional learning capacity and resilience to be able to work in the early years sector. We, as external and internal reviews of quality, were reintroduced post-pandemic. We were delighted to see that the quality has not been impacted, and indeed Care Inspectorate and Education Scotland continue to highlight how well our settings do. We have got extremely positive relationships with our funding providers, and that's through a genuine partnership approach, not only in designing models and delivery, but also through the application process and indeed the annual review of setting the sustainable rate to ensure that our partners continue to work. We have had one partner who has decided to merge their business but not close, and we've also had another partner who has decided who didn't reach the criteria to be involved in funded partnership with us, but we continue to offer an informal support to ensure that that quality remains at the heart. And you'll know that East Renfrewshire's Education Department is a guarantor of quality for ELC, irrespective of where parents take that funding from. It's too early to actually measure the impact, although I'm delighted as part of the Waste Partnership, that we have commenced a research project last session. That will be a longitudinal study, and it will look at the impact on children and families in terms of the additional hours. So, welcome the report in conclusion, and believe that East Renfrewshire is well placed to continue to offer this provision to all children and families. Thank you, Chair.
That's super. Thank you, Janice. I'd like to ask a quick. Well, first of all, Councillor Wallace, have any points to come back on that, or you're quite happy with what you've heard?
Well, there were kind of specific questions, if you like, to do with, as I say, the phrase continued uncertainty around funding for early learning, which I don't think has been addressed in the answer. If you could perhaps broach that one, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Yeah, happy to pick that up, and we've tried to highlight a number of points in the paper that are, I suppose, relevant to that. Councillor Wallace and probably Councillor Edlin will be aware from Education Committee the discussion around the funding, but for both the Chair and Councillor MacDonald, this is something that was discussed, whereby the funding for 1140 hours, Councillor Buchanan, was set. There was a tapered model over a 3-year period, with East Renfrewshire receiving less initially, and that now moving up to the sort of full amount. What that has meant, Councillor Wallace, is that we have had to be extremely efficient. We've had to constantly review our models, and you'll see in paragraph 44 reference to that, to make sure that we are both continuing to meet our duty, I suppose, but delivering that in terms of best value, and also, I suppose, it's also a support in terms of that recruitment part of things, in terms of making sure that we're got sufficient numbers of staff. In terms of the wider sort of funding model, I suppose there's a kind of question there just in terms of local government funding more generally, and all elected members will be aware of some of those wider discussions, but I suppose what we've referenced there in paragraph 43 is the specifics where there's been an implication in terms of early learning and childcare, where we have now moved from children receiving their ELC entitlement from their 3rd birthday, moving that to the national position, and I know that's something that Audit and Scrutiny Committee have discussed kind of previously. So I suppose to respond to your question and the point in that paper, we are going to have to continue to keep our models under review. We will continue to seek that clarity from Scottish Government around what that funding will look like going forward. And I suppose the other piece that is mentioned in the paper is also the impact of deferrals. We're yet to see the sort of full implication, I think, of that. The paper does reference the increase in the number of our youngsters that are in the early years provision, but I suspect that that will continue to increase over the next few years. That was certainly the pattern previously in that way, as early years expanded in that way. So that will put further pressure on, and I guess the other bit that we just need to continue to keep an eye on, and we do every year through that sort of discussions that we have through with Mrs McCrossan in terms of the budget pressures, is just the number of children, and the Audit and Scrutiny Committee will be aware that in terms of the birth rate overall in terms of Scotland, there is that expectation that that will decrease over the next little while. So we're going to have to kind of make sure that we're considering all the different elements so that we can continue to meet that duty.
Chair, Councillor Buchanan would like to ask a question.
Yeah, sure. Let's go ahead, Councillor Buchanan. Thank you. Is there a microphone on at that end?
Again, once to note the quality of the report for the services that we provide in East Renfrewshire. It highlights the decisions that we took early on to progress with the original timescale in rolling out early learning and childcare, which has been shown to be certainly extremely beneficial, not just for ourselves, but obviously for all of the children involved in doing that. And I think it puts us in a very good place. It's a flagship aspect of Scottish Government policy, and we have been seen to deliver on that and supportive of that, and clearly that information, along with the Audit Commission's report, is going back and feeding back to Scottish Government. Again, future funding is always going to be difficult. We saw yesterday in the Chancellor's statement the impact, as we're now starting to realise, will potentially be on local government. And again, once again, another lack of funding from Westminster, and that continues to be a problem. So we are all faced with that uncertainty in terms of future funding. We know that we have delivered across East Renfrewshire and will continue to do so. We know that the policy of the rollout of the 1140 hours, and indeed the enhancement of early learning in childcare, whether that be through the deferrals system and rolling it out to younger children, is a key aspect of Scottish Government policy, and I've no doubt that they will endeavour to continue to do that, recognising the preventative aspects that are involved in it and ensuring that our children and young people are given the best start in life. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Buchanan.
Chair, Councillor Wallace would like to speak again.
Okay, yeah, Councillor Wallace.
Just to thank Councillor Buchanan. So the question was really directed to the education staff, but thank you to Councillor Buchanan for putting a political spin on it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I was simply going to note, obviously, as a result of yesterday's UK budget statement, that there is an expected increase in resources for the Scottish Government of £545 million, which will perhaps allay some of the concerns which we've just heard. I have a question myself for Mark Carratter, and it's concerning the actual physical capacity of the nursery and early learning estate, and whether we expect that to be of sufficient size to see us through future years. We've recently seen in Maidenhill Primary School a need to expand the school not long after it's been commissioned, and likewise there's an extension in the pipeline very shortly for Crookford Primary. So whilst we look at national population changes, we know that we have an expanding population in East Renfrewshire, and I'd appreciate some comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morrison. Yeah, no, I think that's a really important question, and I did allude to it in the previous one, so happy just to give a little bit more detail on that one. It's something that we keep under sort of constant review, both in terms of the school estate, but also in terms of our early years estate, and we're looking at those trends. We look at the national health data to see the number of children coming through to make sure we're planning sufficiently, and committee will probably be aware that in terms of the capital plan, there was agreement to expand provision in St John's Primary School, and that was because, having looked at those numbers, we identified that the places were tight. So for those that perhaps not as familiar with our models, unlike in primary school where you have individual catchments for all the nurseries or primary schools, within early years we have 4 broad areas. So the Barhead and Neilston area was the one area where, in terms of occupancy levels, the numbers were very tight indeed, and so there was agreement made through the capital plan to expand St John's. The other thing that we do as well is that we look at the models and the provision. So Calderwood Lodge has changed its model, and that can also increase the capacity within a particular community. So it's something that we need to keep a close eye on, particularly, as I mentioned, in terms of the deferrals. Should we start to see more of the August to December birthdays deciding to stay in early years, that would obviously increase the number. But at the same time, I suppose what we're seeing nationally, and we'll keep an eye on it locally, is that the number of children under 3 is decreasing. So we are certainly seeing that filter into primary 1, where the numbers in primary 1 this year were slightly lower than they have been in previous years. So we'll continue to keep that under constant review. Councillor Morrison.
That's much appreciated. Thank you, Mark. I think everyone's had a good going through, everyone who's wished to speak or ask a question in this matter. Just to check, are there any further questions from within the chamber before we move on?
I don't see anybody else indicating in the chamber.
No, that's super. Thank you. In which case, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Janice, to you both for the report and for coming along and answering the committee's questions so comprehensively. It's much appreciated. Okay, that takes us on to item number 7, which is a further national external audit report, this time looking at Scotland's city, region and growth deals, progress on 2020 audit report. And I'd like to call on Linda to introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, a copy of the Audit Scotland report on Scotland's city, region and growth deals progress on the 2020 audit report published in June 23 has already been circulated to all Audit and Scrutiny members. The councillor who is leading an assistant councillor Ireland, who's unable to join us today. The head of place has provided comments on the local position and they are appended to the covering report. And both the head of place and principal officer capital projects are attending the meeting today if you get any issues that you want to raise with them.
That's superb. Thank you, Clark. I do actually have a couple of questions myself, if I may kick off and then open it out to the chamber. So first of all, it's with regards the Cabinet Paper report from 3rd of March 2023, which is referenced within the committee's papers today. On page 4 of that Cabinet item, there's a couple of references. Bear in mind, this report was dated the 3rd of March 2023, so it's now quite old. The outline business case for the Ryde South Railway Station was to be drafted in a funding tranche approved in August 2023. And I'd simply like to know an update if that was indeed approved. The second item was on paragraph 20 of the same, concerning the Oz Road improvements. That was put to tender, supposed to be in spring 2023, and I'd like to know if there was any update to that tendering process and any outcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Morrison. So just to update you on the railway station, the outline business case for Balgrave Station was approved by Cabinet in August 23 and that has released the next tranche of funding. The Council has entered into a services agreement with Network Rail, who have appointed Story Contracting to undertake the detailed design of the station. Site investigation work has started and to determine the exact layout and the technical specification for the station and the platforms. And the Council is working very closely with Transport Scotland to conclude issues relating to the detailed strategic transport assessment process, and that relates primarily to detailed timetabling issues. We plan to take the full business case back to Chief Executives for approval in May, June next year. And then, in terms of the Oz Road realignment and the full business case, there was a couple of months' delays on getting that to the Chief Executives and to Cabinet, to Chief Executives for approval. That was approved in October this year. The delays were due to some detail of private land, of deals with private landowners and legal agreements with Scottish Water, who are our partners there. The tender period ran from May to July, and we've received 5 successful bids for the project that were within the tender, and a preferred bidder has been identified, John Graham, and we're just tying up the final agreements for that contract to be signed. We have completed, therefore, the full business case. It was approved, as I said, by Chief Executives in October, and we're anticipating site work to commence in January 24.
That's super, Michelle. Thank you for the comprehensive update on both of them. It's good to know that the projects are moving apace. Now, are there any questions from members online, members in the chamber? Councillor Buchanan. Could Councillor Buchanan please switch on his microphone?
It's good to hear the progress that has been made at long last. I think one of the most frustrating aspects of this, and having been involved in it since very early on, has been the frequent delays, whether it be the stag reports and issues with Transport Scotland, and indeed the same with Scottish Water and some of the problems over the realignment of Oz Road. So it's great to note that, that they are progressing, hopefully progressing well, and it'll be good to note that as much as there'll be some initial issues in straightening of Oz Road and travel difficulties, but I think the long-term aspect of getting that work started and the work completed will bring about a significant change for that area and make a massive difference, as it was initially intended to do. And I look forward to the rail station coming online. It's great to note that we've finally got the second stag report, and it's all completed, and that groundworks are starting, and I look forward to that beginning as well, despite the increased costs which many of the time delays have added to, as well as obviously the pandemic. But it's good to note that it's now on track, and that we now have some more specific dates in terms of the work actually being done.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Michelle, do you have anything further to add to that?
No, I've nothing more to add.
Okay, that's super, thank you. I think Councillor Buchanan's microphone's still on.
I don't see any other questions in the chamber being indicated.
Okay, on that basis, we're happy to accept the report and move on. Okay, I think that's agreed. Okay, item number 8, the last item of today's agenda, is an update by our Chief Auditor, Michelle Blair, on the internal audit plan for the 2023-24 year. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the progress report for quarter 2. There's been one audit completed from Plan 23-24 audit work in the second quarter of the year, although there have been further ones since the end of the quarter. As noted in page 49, covering report makes mention of one new item covered by contingency. This was really to help another service to source some information, and some contingency time was also used to assist a service to automate a spreadsheet that was already in existence, but it was automated to try and reduce the likelihood of human error and save them some time during the year. Appendix 3, page 55, there's some details of audits where responses have been received since the last progress report. The only one I would really bring to your attention is the debtors control audit. The two main issues in this were that firstly there was high levels of payroll debt, and this is I'm specifically talking about debt arising from accounts being raised for people that have left the council. There's also high levels of payroll debt relating to existing employees, and more detail about this will be provided in probably the next progress report or the one after, when we've completed the payroll audit, which we're doing at the moment. Secondly, within debtors control, there's lists of users on Integra not being updated promptly for leavers, and I think what I want to bring out as common to both of these is that they're primarily caused by managers not taking the actions expected of them. Firstly, notifying payroll and HR when someone leaves, and notifying system administrators of people that have left the council. The issue surrounding leavers has been flagged in a number of different audits now, and it's a continual problem, and I know it's a problem in other councils as well. Appendix 4, you've got the interim performance indicators. They're currently all being met apart from 2.2, which measures direct audit days as a percentage of total days available. It's slightly behind our target, but that's due usually to timing, that there's more annual leave taken in the first 2 quarters of the year, so that'll probably level out later in the year. Subject to any questions, I would ask you to note the progress report, and also if you would indicate any of the members want any of the reports circulated to them.
Mary, David, Grace, have you guys lost the feed from headquarters as well?
Yes, I have.
Yes,
Yeah.
I couldn't hear. Yeah, problem now. Thanks.
Okay. I think I'll need to pop something in the box on to see that.
You could just give a moment, we'll see if we can
I
sort
don't think
out
I've ever experienced that before.
I can see the image
online
on the
members
screen
can still
here.
communicate, but they lose the feed from the chamber.
We can hear you.
Essentially, the chamber is just coming in as one other person on Teams. There was a little disruption to it at the last full council, so those of us in the chamber couldn't hear.
Can everybody hear us in the chamber? I think this coming online.
We're getting you now. Yes, we probably missed the last minute and a half or so.
I wonder if I could just ask the Chief Auditor just to maybe reiterate her comments. I mean, did you hear her comments on the debtor control report?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, she was speaking to that point, and the need for staff leavers to be updated, and that was coming up on a number of different audits. and that's when it started.
Right, so I think it's the section on the performance indicators. Yeah.
Okay, so the interim performance indicators are currently shown in Appendix 4. We're meeting the indicators apart from 2.2, which measures direct audit days as a percentage of total days available. And this is due to a timing of more annual leave and public holidays are taken in the first 2 quarters of the year, so it should level out towards the end of the year. Subject to any questions, I would ask you to note the progress report, and also if members could indicate if they want any of the reports circulated in full.
That's great, thank you, Michelle. If I could make one small request before we open up to general questions regarding the report on debtors control. It would be quite helpful to have an update in the first meeting of this committee in 2024, whether that's January or February, on the implementation of the recommendations, because I see some of those have a deadline of December 23. So for department managers, it's not quite past the timescale for that yet. So it'd be quite good to get an update in the new year on how it's been implemented, if that's doable.
I can certainly feed that back. Whether that's doable in terms of timescale, the draft agenda for the meeting in January actually goes out very soon. I think it's on the 3rd or 5th of January. But failing that, I think we could ask for it for the February meeting. So just ask for it as soon as possible and not later than February, if that's agreeable.
That would be super. Thank you, Linda. I mean, fresh from this cybersecurity training I attended yesterday, it does pose a risk where you have dormant accounts for online systems which are sitting there empty rather than being deleted from the system, because it basically provides means by which people from outside the organisation can infiltrate our systems, particularly financial systems and payroll systems, where it's quite sensitive. And nobody would notice because it's they're using basically a dormant account for a former staff member. So there are real particular concerns around that we would have to look at. Now, are there any questions from members in the chamber at all, or members online?
Yeah, we have a question from Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace.
Just a couple of things. First of all, two questions, if I could just ask them separately. First of all, how's staffing at the moment within the internal audit? Thanks.
We've still got 2 vacancies, and the advert is currently running until the 7th of January.
Okay, thank you. I think, as we know, as an audit committee, that this has been ongoing for quite a number of months now, if not years. And particularly concerned to read that what minimum resource we do have within internal audit has been used to solve other people's problems and in other departments rather than doing a specific audit work. So it's just to highlight that, a concern. And I think the second one is there seems to be a theme running through some of these reports that are coming to audit. We've just had one there, a suggestion that management not doing what they're supposed to do in terms of debt control, etc., with staff that are leaving. And that echoes a situation we had within procurement, within the Environment Department. It's quite clear from that when they came to the Audit Committee that the management were not doing their jobs. Now, there must be specific reasons for that, whether it's a culture within the department, or secondly, whether it's quite simply short-staffed and extremely under pressure. There may be other factors, but that's the kind of 2 I can kind of highlight at the moment or suggest at the moment. I do feel we're at the situation now in which we maybe have to get human resources in front of the audit committee just to find out exactly what's going on in terms of recruitment. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, Michelle, any comment to Councillor Wallace's comments?
Not really. Hopefully I'll be able to give you more of an update at the next audit committee, because the recruitment closing date will have passed and we'll know how many applicants there have been. But I do know that it's a problem across all council sections. But I've got my fingers crossed. I'm hopeful this time.
That's super, thank you. And in terms of the points, in terms of, management following protocols and processes, I mean, it's very difficult as in the Audit Scrutiny Committee. We're here to look at the systems that are in place, excuse me, and ensure that those systems are sufficient and appropriate to ensure that the kind of situations that have been outlined here in debtors are avoided. If people do not follow those systems, well, that's a whole other matter. And I think it is something which needs to be looked at. Is it a case of corners being cut because of a cultural issue, or people are so busy and stressed that it's something they intend to go back to, but sadly never actually do. So I think we do need to get to the bottom of that. And the question I would suppose I would ask is there any degree of automation which can be put in place here? I don't have to be a payroll expert to know when someone leaves the employment of an organisation, they get a P45. It's the first thing that their new employer would ask for. So if the system's generating a P45, is there any way that we can generate a list of, well, these are the people we need to review their credentials for the council systems to ensure that they've been updated? Is there any way we could be using automation or AI to help make this process more compliant?
It's something the council could maybe consider. I don't really know who's the best person to answer that. Part of the problem is that it's not IT that are responsible for all the different systems across the council. There's different system administrators, so when somebody leaves, it's not necessarily easy for managers to know who to contact to say, please take employee X off the council tax system or Integra or whatever system it is. Maybe that should be more automated and a centralised list kept. But there's also managers are supposed to complete leavers lists when people leave. Anytime we've tested this in the past, there's always been gaps, and whether the leavers lists have been completed or not, we can't generally see them. They might be completed and sitting in a manager's desk, but they're certainly not kept in a central place that's easy to find. But as I say, these are all issues that we repeat time and time again because it's an ongoing issue. Obviously, you're also aware that we're doing the payroll audit, so that will come out quite soon. We're finalising it today, actually, and hopefully issue it in the next few weeks. But that'll probably be of interest to the committee members as well in a future meeting.
Thank you, Michelle. I suspect it would be of significant interest to us all based on that and previous payroll issues that we've discussed as a committee. There's one further question I would ask is, do you believe you working from home practices are part of this? Out of sight, out of mind perhaps applies to a degree here. People that have been working from home and leave the council, it's perhaps not as apparent to their line managers that those people should have their credentials removed, versus when you see people in an office every day and all of a sudden you don't see them. Is that perhaps a factor in all of this?
I've not analysed that. I probably could look and see which services the problems arise most frequently, but it might well be ones where people are having to be present because of the nature of the job. I just don't know. I'd have to look at that.
Okay, I appreciate we're asking you a number of questions that you're not in a position to answer just now, Michelle, but appreciate your work on this, and I look forward to the further report which will come to the committee early in the new year and further the payroll report. Are there any further questions?
Margaret McCrossan would like to make a comment.
Thank you.
It was just on the last question about working from home. That should not be a factor because our staff generally do not have working from home contracts. They've got hybrid contracts, so they're required to be in the office a minimum of 2 days a week in most cases, and in some cases substantially more, and then obviously there are lots of jobs that can't work from home at all. So there shouldn't be any number of staff who do not see their supervisor on a weekly basis. at least.
I appreciate that clarification, Margaret. I was coming from the point of view, people may be in the office on a Monday, Tuesday, and some of their others within their team may on a Thursday, Friday, for example, and many weeks and months go by and they don't actually physically see each other, and it wouldn't perhaps dawn on someone that, actually, that member of staff left months ago. And I was just alluding to that as a slightly different workplace culture from where we were at a few years ago, where you would notice somebody being absent every day. So are there any further comments or questions at all from members?
Yeah, we have Councillor Ledron first and then Councillor Wallace.
Chair, in view of Ms McCrossan's last comments, I have difficulty getting my head around how this is happening, that documentation and people systems are not being updated when people leave, or perhaps in sickness situations where the processes are not being updated properly, which is what I understood was said. And I really don't, perhaps my inexperience of it is preventing me from seeing a way around this, but I'd have thought there must be a way of sorting this out, and what seems to be coming out of it is, well, it's going on, there's nothing we can do about it, but I think there must be something we can do about it, which can have a relatively quick impact to sort this out. And I just feel very concerned about it.
Chair, if I could just maybe make a comment there, that a number of the recommendations that have to be completed to do with the audit that the Chief Auditor is referring to are aimed at trying to address those issues. So if we get feedback on that, and there's an officer here to speak to that report, that should maybe answer any questions that you've got on that, or give you an opportunity to ask further ones if you're unhappy with that.
No, that's very good, thank you. I think also the fact that we as a committee are discussing it, and we'll have further discussions on the matter, I think sends a clear message too, that this is something that we're going to be paying more attention to. So I think that is quite important from a cultural point of view within the organisation. I believe Councillor Wallace had a further question to ask.
Yeah, it was just I know I'd sort of mentioned earlier on about the possibility of a kind of culture difficulty, and it might not just be in terms of an internal culture difficulty, but is it possible that the home working has changed a mindset in terms of maybe certain disciplines that are not able to be followed through, because it's working from home feels relatively informal compared to the formality of working within a building. So it's, as I say, there seems to be a theme coming through here that's over the last few meetings that we've had in the Audit Committee of certain things that are just not happening that should happen and that are having an impact on performance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just be clear that what you're agreeing at this point is that we'll ask for feedback on the implementation of the recommendations, and we'll also hear from the Chief Auditor at the next meeting where she is on the recruitment process, and that's the action that's been agreed just now, and you may review that at that point, what you want to do, but just want to be clear on that.
That's absolutely correct, Clerk. I mean, looking at page 56, recommendation 4.1.2, timescale for completion on that is the 31st of December 23. Likewise for 4.2.1, 4.5.1, there's a number of recommendations here. There's another one for the 30th of November. So we're not in a position yet to conclude that all of Michelle's recommendations and internal audit's recommendations have been implemented. So we will need to look after 31st of December to ensure that there is the desired behavioural change and systems change that would avert the issues which have been identified.
And I can certainly make the person who will be providing that report aware of the comments that have been made at the meeting today.
Thank you. We have a question from Provost Montague.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to quash the idea that working from home is any less industrious or formal. I know when I'm sure this is shared with many of you as well. You're working from home, you're concentrated, you're on your laptop, you're working non-stop, probably less breaks than that I would be taking if I was working in the office, for example. So I really just want to reiterate that. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I mean, obviously you and I are currently working from home, and I would not be in the chamber today with infecting you all with what I have. So I fully appreciate your comments. I think we're primarily getting at the point of view of being, is out of sight, out of mind, rather than any sort of questions around efficiency. It's more around the cultural impact and whether certain things are fallen by the wayside in terms of our procedures. So,
the Chief Auditor would like to make a comment, Chair.
Yes.
Really just to pick up on the point that you said you would like somebody to come back and say whether they've implemented the recommendations. It was just to clarify that we will do a follow-up of this regardless at some point in the new year. That was really all.
Yeah, that'd be much appreciated. Councillor MacDonald had his hand raised up and down. Councillor MacDonald, do you have a question you'd like to ask?
Not so much a question, it was just really a point that I just wanted to raise with what Councillor Wallace and both Councillor Montague had stated about the benefits of hybrid working and also the concerns that Councillor Wallace expressed. And I agree with both of them in the sense that, there are obvious added benefits of having the flexibility to be able to work from home. There's no question we all benefit from that to a certain degree. But I also share Councillor Wallace's reservations about whether things have gotten a bit lax over a period of time. And I wonder whether going forward we might want to look at the possibility of a hybrid type working situation that would be mandatory, in the sense that, at least 1, possibly 2 days a week, or maybe a half day, a day and a half a week, that people would be required to come into an office environment to have that, I suppose, overseeing of protocols being followed through and right working practices and things, just a calibration, if you will. Thank you.
I think that's a very sensible contribution, Councillor MacDonald. I don't know if anyone has any comment that they would add to that, or
Councillor Wallace, Chair.
Yeah, just to say, I mean, we've all got different experiences of this on tidbits of information of our own experience. What I'm just trying to get at here is it would be of value, I think, that given the kind of comments we've had today, is to maybe get a paper together, or just a thought from me from HR that I dare say there must have been studies done on this. There'll be numerous studies on this home working as to whether we can get an update on what the general views that are coming back as to whether they reflect what's going on in East Renfrewshire, rather, as I say, than us all chipping in our own personal experiences. Thank you.
I can certainly add that into what's been agreed and ask for a report on that if you would like.
That's super, thank you. Now, I appreciate a lot of the discussion this item has been around that particular debtors control audit report. I would ask the members, have any other views on any other aspect of Michelle's report to comment on here. And are there any detailed reports members would like to request in accordance with recommendation 5B? No, I think that's a no. So we're happy to accept the report as is. Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of the agenda for today's meeting, as it is the last meeting before the festive period. Wish you all a very Merry Christmas, and I'll see you in the new year. Thank you.